It's quite a simple title, which is composition in grey and black. For me, the title points to something about the formal qualities of the object. So it sounds like a title from a modernist painting. And I've used chairs as ways of talking about the body. I mean, that's quite a straightforward thing for sculpture, is, you know, what we sit on. If you tip them on their side, they become sculptural because you've removed their functions. And I had this plastic chair in the studio that this is a replica of. And then I also had an old tyre, because I lived in a rural setting, so there was old tyres all over the place. So this piece is kind of constructed, and I would laminate the timbers together. With the tyre, I had to carve it together and then pull it apart and then put it back together, which felt secretive, like something I had to do on away from people. It's kind of like a duh. Like, put those two things together. And I like the absurdity of that, and how absurdity sort of runs through the whole show of, like, what about if I did that? What about if I did this? And kind of that's almost the beginning premise for making any of the work, is some sense of the absurd. Yeah. So with the car, which is maybe a great example, there is a memory of playing in a car, and a memory of it being a spaceship, and a memory of it being a Toyota Corolla. I think that there's a kind of way in which it's chaff, you know. Throw it up and hide behind it. As an artist, I'm creating these things, and I'm trying to figure out about inside and outside, and what those things mean, and what they mean now, and how to approach them now in this contemporary context, I suppose. So the car was made in 2017. It's an awkward piece, and it's not a showstopper. And when I'm looking back on something like my childhood and the experience of being in a car wreck, of not actually literally being in a car wreck, but being in a wrecked car, and playing in it with a friend, and then trying to collapse time down and make sense of that. And that's what I'm doing when I'm laminating the timber together. You're taking all these samples of time, embodied time, and pushing them together and holding them together, and then shaping a form out of that. So that's titled, I Don't Want You to Worry About Me, I've Met Some Beautiful People. And the office itself is based on Keanu Reeves' office from the first Matrix, where he has been late to work. He's just been given a hard time by his boss for being late, you know, buck up your act. And he's sitting in his cubicle, kind of with that sort of grey, very grey, depressing space, and he receives a package. And it's Morpheus on the phone, and the agents are coming to get him, and he has to make a decision. But I like the way that it's this encounter with the world could be other than what it is. There's a radical chance for change at any point. I think that the work is somehow an incarnation of that grey space and of that potential in that space. That something could arrive at any moment, but we might have to prompt it. It's called the Whitney, something like the Whitney Fire Suppression System, R.I.P. Arnold. Yeah, it's one of my shorter titles. There was an amazing show on at the Whitney, and it was one of those shows which was a survey, and it was of Alexander Calder. I was in the space of the art, and sometimes moving around the space of the art with all the other people moving around the space of the art. It's a really strange phenomenon. And there's a certain level of intensity, and there's security guards making sure you don't stand on things or touch things. Instead of taking the elevator, I took the stairs. And then in the stairs, I came across, there's this bright red fire suppression system for the Whitney. And I'd just been looking at Alexander Calder's bright, beautiful geometric shapes. And then there's this cylinder with these circular valves and all these kinds of different geometric shapes made up into a form that performs a function, and it's brightly coloured. But it's tucked away. And so I was photographing that, was trying to do it quickly because I didn't want to be caught, because that would just be odd to be in the hallway photographing this thing. Nothing illicit in it, but just odd. And so sneakily trying to take these photos, and then heading out into the next exhibition space. But I think that transition between the two and being able to experience myself experiencing something, I wanted to record that. And I suppose that's how it connects with the potentials in the everyday, which I like, of being able to look up. You know, like, I think that don't look up film's quite classic, because it's sort of like, people don't. And when you do, what can you do with that? And I like the thing that you could actually make art about it. You could do something with it. Because I was doing this observing of these bits of the institutions that weren't what the institution was trying to show. Often the institution is trying to show us certain things, and some of it's the art and some of it's the exit doors. I'm going to this mecca to look at Jackson Pollock or to look at Brancusi in this case of the Guggenheim, and then you've got a security guard who has to spend all day with it. Every day, you know, like on and on and on, standing there watching this work. And so I imagined at night, I think it's called At Night at the Museum, which is another slightly filmic reference of the way that the museum comes alive when everyone stops looking at it. And I imagine that the security guard is the person who gets to witness that, gets to witness these objects kind of coming to life outside of our looking, outside of our viewing. And the security guard might do their rounds and smoke a cigarette. Also the way that they're scattered and arranged, and each sort of cigarette has this sculptural quality to it. You know, it's this compressed form that's been burnt up and then compressed and pushed down, that pressure of the human hand in relation to this hard surface. So you've got water, you've got life, and you've got death with the cigarettes. You've got this combination of kind of human needs, life and death, you know. Justin Patton was putting on a show called Debuilding, and it was about that transition space or the changeover space between shows. He asked me to come down and have a look through the back of house and to come and look through what goes on behind the scenes. I came across a storeroom which had all of the paint pots from previous exhibitions, and they had little notes on them from the technicians and the gallery assistants, and the notes were things like, you know, Ron Muick plinth paint, the naked and the nude. How could I bring these sort of elements together? And like a core sample seemed to be the most logical thing, that you would bore down into the institution and remove this core sample. And so I sort of think of it like that, as though it's this stack of history, I guess, history of the institution in a moment in time, and going from floor to ceiling. And then, of course, the earthquake happened, and that was 10 days after the show started. Well, it's constructing it in a way that it can flex and move. And so once the gallery reopened, the sculpture, from what I've heard, became part of a kind of a conversation around strength and around resilience.